G'day guys. With New World Aeternum launching on October 16th, a lot of people have gotten back into New World, especially after the recent beta period bringing a ton of hype back to the game. There's a lot that's changed over the last few years of New World's life, especially if you haven't played since before something like Brimstone Sands. This video is going to go over all of the big changes and additions, sort of in chronological order, sort of not. That includes new resources, new bosses, dungeons, events, abilities, and weapons. Literally everything you need to know about the current state of New World going into Aeternum. And then we're going to go into the Aeternum system changes, like ammo and durability, and how they affect the current content. And that'll all be at the end of the video, so be sure to stick around for that. Starting off, base game. The max gear score was 625, every gathering type had a level 150 material that was geared towards endgame crafting. These included orichalcum for mining, wire fiber for harvesting, ironwood for woodcutting, and iron hide for skinning. This is New World as most people remember it. Gold was scarce and costs were high. Companies and factions would spam PvP missions to gain influence in regions to topple the current owners, declare war, and then if they win, they would, change the taxes or maybe upgrade a different crafting station, something would change. Outpost Rush was the only PvP match-made game mode, with decent rewards for those looking to farm it, but most of the PvP happened out in the open world during PvP missions or while trying to topple influence. The original weapon list included sword, rapier, hatchet, great axe, hammer, bow, musket, life staff, ice gauntlet, and fire staff. During this time, the balance was pretty off. I don't know if anybody remembers it, but great axe and hammer were pretty broken. There are a lot of weapons and playstyles that were vastly overpowered compared to their counterparts, and that kind of extended for a pretty long time. Equip load also used to be a lot different. Lightweight gave a 20% damage buff, and it uses the same dodge roll as it does today. Medium weight gave a 10% damage buff, a 10% buff to CC duration, and it also had the same side hop as today. Heavyweight equip load used to give an extra 15% block stability, 20% CC duration, and it still retains the near useless sidestep. As a little side note, New World used to have the auto lock feature that was present in the beta for Aeternum, and probably will be launching with the re-release. It was pretty quickly removed originally, but it functioned about the same, with the instant lock-ons and the accuracy boosts. Now that we've got the baseline down and we've refreshed our memories, let's move down the line to the first major update, which was Brimstone Sands. One more thing before we move on. A lot of these changes are pretty poorly documented, so I apologize if I've gotten some of the dates or ordering wrong. Most of this information comes from the active New World community at the time, so major props to them for keeping discussion alive surrounding these changes. The first major content update, Brimstone Sands, introduced a whole lot to New World. A full new region in the top left of the map, complete with a giant story. It came with a new weapon, a new ability in the Heartgem runes, and a new way to farm loot. First up, Greatsword was added, a two-handed weapon with offensive and defensive stances that changed the way abilities work. Everfall and Monarch's Bluff also had a mini glow-up, which a lot of people have noticed actually coming back into the game. There's more points of interest and named enemies spawning, and it all just sort of feels a lot more alive. The main story of Brimstone Sands is really good. It's super fun, but it's also mandatory. That's because it unlocks glyphs. Glyphs, or sigils, or symbols, or whatever you want to call them, are a new mechanic used to chest farm in Brimstone Sands. ECR, or Elite Chest Runs, are still arguably the best way to get higher gear score and better loot. These are routes the community have come up with that hit as many elite chests as possible, which are on a timed cooldown of a few hours. In Brimstone Sands, most of the elite chests require a glyph to open, which can be found throughout Brimstone Sands, and they are permanent unlocks. There's more than 20 of them, with a good few coming from the main story itself. Heartgem runes were also added in Brimstone Sands. They're all pretty powerful abilities that can be used whenever you're in combat active for long enough. So taking damage, dealing damage, healing, it all generates a charge for your Heartgem. that can be expended for a powerful ability depending on which Heartgem you have slotted. They can all be upgraded, and there's a huge system, and it's a pretty big investment of both time and resources. Now, I believe somewhere between Brimstone Sands and the next major content update, Rise of the Angry Earth, the equip load was changed, and it was sort of balanced, and the way we currently have it is that light equip load gives you a 15% damage boost, it increases the duration of incoming CC, it increases your outgoing healing by, I believe, 15% now at the moment. It also decreases block stability by 15%. What this means for light equip load is that it is much more DPS role oriented. It is now 100%, you deal more damage and you heal your allies and yourself for more at the cost of having a lower armor and then also being stunned by CC for more. Medium armor, or medium equip load, was changed and it has nothing special. There's no damage modifier, no CC duration, no outgoing healing, no block stability. It is the default now. It's been changed from where most people would pick probably heavy armor back during when the game came out. Now it is, the default is medium. For heavy armor, it now deals minus 15% and minus either 30 or 15% healing. They take 20% less CC duration, and they have an extra 15% block stability. This change cements heavy armor as the designated tank role. Heavy armor also has the bonus of increased threat generation from taunting gems and perks to account for the decrease in damage output. It is the default tank role now. If you're playing in a group and you're running two-handed weapons, you will more than likely be in heavy armor. There is very little debate about it now. Also, sometime before Angry Earth came out, Blunderbuss and Void Gauntlet were also added. I can't remember and I can't find the specifics of when they were added, but they're in the game now. Blunderbuss is a burst DPS ranged weapon, kind of a ranged weapon. It's very short range, but it is still a ranged weapon. High burst damage, high mobility, high utility. It's very useful for PvP as a finisher weapon or for single target damage as an offhand for DPS players. Void Gauntlet is a super unique magic weapon scaling with focus and intelligence that tries to maximize damage over time stacks through either its melee or its ranged functionalities. In Aeternum, Void Gauntlet's Void Blade mode is going to function more as a toggle and less as a timed ability, so the melee playstyle for Void Gauntlet is going to be fleshed out a little bit more when Aeternum comes out. But let's move on to the biggest content drop in New World's history, which is Rise of the Angry Earth, or Angry Earth for short. Angry Earth introduced the most recent new weapon, a new level cap, a world boss system, a new rarity, and arguably most people's favorite inclusion, mounts. Let's start off with the elephant in the room here. First Light, the entire area, is gone. It's been entirely replaced by the Elysian Wilds, which is an awesome area filled with stuff to do. There's world bosses, new strongholds, and new materials to farm. You still can go to First Light, it's just been overrun by enemies, and there's a fun little event there. Artifacts were introduced with Angry Earth, which are red tier items with designated perks that offer unique build crafting benefits. You're only allowed one in each slot, however, armor, weapon, and jewelry. There's a few added each season with the season pass, which are then reintroduced into the loot pool once the season ends. And all artifacts have designated farms and drop rates. Some of them are absurd too, especially for PvP. My favorite personally is Sin, which is a hatchet all about stacking debuffs. Mounts were introduced, with some fun and unique system mechanics to actually integrate them into gameplay. A lot of games just add mounts and that's it, right? You buy a mount and it's a skin and nothing else comes from it. With mounts comes the riding skill, which gives you access to different horseshoes that change the way your mount works, and leveling is as simple as feeding your mount every day. Angry Earth also came with the largest set of reworks ever, with most gear perks getting huge buffs, leading to our current meta of things like Trenchant Strikes and crits as opposed to pure stat boosting with buffs like Empowered. A lot of ability-specific perks were buffed, like Keen Tondo, which has led to Rapier having some extremely strong capabilities at the moment. Now, let's talk about PvP, and this is sort of overarching changes of PvP, because New World is kind of always tried to be this sort of PvP-centric game with, company wars, faction wars, and outpost rush. PvP has always had these benefits, and it's always sort of been pushed forward, and it's really enjoyable, actually. If you get down to it, PvP is a super fun game mode and a super fun activity. It's replayable. And so over the course of the game's life, there have been a ton of changes and additions in regards to quality of life and the player experience. Influence races were added relatively recently, where influence towers are scattered around each region. They can be captured and held by PvP-enabled players, giving their faction bonus influence in the region during the race. This allows for actual mass PvP in the open world, the kind that's been advertised since the game's launch, and it's really fun in populated servers, and overall it's a much better system compared to what we had before. We also got 3v3 Arena, which is a great match-made alternative to Outpost Rush. It's a best-of-5 format, where winning 3 rounds will win the match. It's always good to play a few of these each day for the Azoth, Salt, and bonus PvP rewards. Speaking of, Azoth Salt and the PvP track is a great system that was introduced back in 2022. The PvP reward track is advanced at certain PvP XP thresholds and has a whole bunch of unique PvP exclusive rewards that are both great functionally and cosmetically. Azoth Salt is a new PvP currency that's earned through gaining XP while flagged for PvP, completing PvP tracks, and a bunch of PvP activities. It's used to claim rewards from the track. You pretty much always have enough of it to claim whatever you want from the track, but stockpiling it can be relatively important to grab something that you really want. And the rewards from the track are incredible. You will get artifacts, you will get crazy good gear rolls, you'll get cool cosmetics. The track, work on it, it's good fun. I highly recommend it. New World is in a state where you can actually have a PvP and a PvE build, and the game makes that super easy with the gear set UI tab. The unique PvP exclusive perks allow weapons and armor to have these super powerful bonuses that are only active in PvP, like headshots piercing X amount of armor or dealing X amount extra damage with ranged weapons. That's just a good example, I think, of something that wouldn't be allowed in PvE, but is allowed in PvP. And creating that distinction has been super helpful for build crafting and more engaging PvP gameplay. Speaking of tracks, we also got season passes, relatively generic if you know what a season pass is. The way you actually gain XP for the pass is super unique. I really enjoy the way that it's done with the stamp card, and back in, I think it was season 3, it was changed so you can use your wild stamps, which are free stamps that are given for either completing a row or they're given to you one a day. The way that this was done and changed to where maxing out a card is super important. You can pretty much clear one of these cards in about 6 or 7 objectives if you use your wild stamps correctly. And it actually adds sort of a level on top of the battle pass where there is some sort of strategy and planning around maxing out your XP for it. That is really fun. It kind of reminds me of Wondrous Tales from Final Fantasy. It's pretty much the same system, except it's relative to the battle pass instead. Gypsum and Gypsum Orbs are something that you'll see a ton during the grind now. They're used to upgrade Heartgem runes, rerolling legendary and artifact perks, and they're also used to craft the matrix components to bring armor, weapons, and jewelry up to level. Gypsum in its entirety is a completely separate video. It's a very huge system with a lot of niche things. There's so many different types of Gypsum Orbs, and they can be earned through different activities, and they drop everywhere. You'll see them all the time. In Aeternum, we're getting a new raid. There was a raid released in Brimstone Sands, and that is a lot of fun. We're getting a new one, but the biggest changes for most people's gameplay are coming to durability and ammo. Both are getting removed. Repair parts are getting removed. It's a huge change, and it'll help push more money into the economy, especially early on. It also makes death less punishing, and the solo experience shouldn't be as bad. It shouldn't feel as punishing anymore. In regards to ammo, the way that it currently works is that once you hit max level, you're basically only going to be using Orichalcum ammo because it gives a 1.2 times buff to your range damage. There are 4, maybe 5 tiers of ammo at the moment, with all scaling from 1 times to 1.2 times extra damage. But those early levels of ammo are pretty irrelevant now. All of it's getting removed, and ranged weapons are getting a base 1.2 times damage buff to compensate for the loss of Orichalcum ammo, which is huge. It improves the early game for ranged weapons massively. Arguably, they'll be more viable. In endgame, the ranged weapons really aren't that great, besides maybe Blunderbuss. But I've been having a ton of fun with bow and musket, and if we keep the auto-aim feature, or the auto-lock-on, ranged weapons will have slightly more skill, slightly less skill. It's kind of a weird thing, but there'll be a lot more fun to play, definitely. Also with Aeternum, the gear score cap is getting upped to 725. We're also getting a brand new open world PvP area, similar to old school RuneScape's Wilderness. We don't know the specifics really around group PvP here, but what we do know are that there are chests and keys that drop from enemies, with high-level loot dropping here in the southwest corner of Cutlass Keys. This just reminds me of the Division's Dark Zone, and if there aren't really restrictions on group PvP, maybe you can only go in there as a solo, maybe something like that. If there aren't those restrictions, we're going to see a lot of stacked parties running through and mass clearing. And I think we'll just have to wait to see how that actually plays out. But at the end of the day, overall, whether you're a new player or a returning one, New World has a huge amount of updates and fixes to the economy, gear, systems, everything since launch. Let me know your thoughts on New World and Aeternum down in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.